Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with Legal Reference Part 2. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Charlie Taylor. I'm one of the CE consultants here at KDLA. Please chat in and let me know if you cannot hear, or if you want to let me know how the sound is, that's fine too. Just want to make sure everybody's covered. We're going to do a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions for Jennifer, our presenter today, Jennifer Frazier, go ahead and chat those in as we go along. If you have any technical issues, chat those in as well, anything with the sound or the slides, and I will be helping out on that end. At the end of the webinar, you'll be able to download your own copy of the slides. We're going to go live on the internet, so the slides will kind of be a guide. They're not going to be exactly what we're seeing, but they'll be a guide to remind you of where we've been. So you can download that. And for those of you who are attending our webinar live, you'll be receiving a certificate of attendance for today, as well as a link to a survey. We really appreciate your feedback on those surveys. So when you see that come through, we ask just take a couple minutes and give us your feedback and any information on any future webinars that you might like to see. Looks like the sound is good. I'm going to move us over into our presentation. And again, please feel free to chat in questions as we go along. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Frazier from the State Law Library now.
Afternoon, everybody. Like Charlie said, I really kind of use the slides as a reference point, and I just kind of jump to the internet once I get going. Okay, so pardon me, just one second. Excuse me. Where we left off last time is with statutes and regulations. And so GPO, FedSys is going to be the best place to go for your federal stuff, but I'm going to start out by jumping to the LRC's website for the Kentucky statutes. I'm going to do my sharing. Oh, I forgot to hit the button. Okay. Now we're ready to go. All right, so LRC's website has actually really got a lot of great stuff on it for your legal research and things like that. And when you have patrons come into the library, there's going to be plenty of times when they want to know the law on something. And as librarians, we really can't say, well, the law on dog bites is this, because there could be statutes, there could be case law, there could be local ordinances. Local ordinances are usually not online anywhere, so those are something they have to go to the county clerk's office to look up. So we just never want to actually say the law on X is Y. So, however, we can direct them to the laws themselves. So here's the LRC's website. The Kentucky Revised Statutes right over here on the left-hand side. I usually can just jump right into the chapters, and it's actually not a bad idea for you as well. Like if somebody wants to know something about wills and trusts, you know, how do I file my dad's will, or what do I do about that? Then you can just sort of page down, and it should have a title here. There it is. And so you can set somebody down on the computer and just say, okay, now you can look through all of these chapters, and then you're not telling them what the law on it is, they're reading it for themselves, but you've guided them someplace where they can actually find what they're looking for. Because a lot of time that's what it's going to sort of be when they come in. Now, there's definitely going to be things in here that they're not going to understand, but this is where they really need to seek out an attorney, or they can try and find the Guide to the Probate Court, which I showed last time, which is available on the AOC's website. But if they want to know the law of things, just send them to the statutes. Now, going back, you can actually search the statutes, and it's a pretty good search. Used to not be that great, but it used to not be great because it would bring up every single possible thing that had like the word will in it, including acts and things that didn't even pass. And it didn't have like the statute numbers here like it does now. And it was very random looking. So they have improved this a lot. So these are every statute that has the word will in it. So obviously it's going to be a lot of them because, you know, it's finding that word. And so anytime they said, well, they will do this or they will do that. So that's where you find the statutes, and that's for searching. Now you can also search through the Kentucky Administrative Regulations, the Constitution, and the bills. And this is the same search as what I was telling you about that isn't as well done. And it just brings up every time a bill that would even have that word in it. But you can try to narrow it by searching just the legislative record or the Constitution or the KRS. But it brings up a whole lot of hits when you search just everything. All right, so something else I'm going to show you how to do. I'm not sure how much use you would have for it if you were working with a patron, but it still comes in handy to know, is kind of following a bill all the way through enactment to when it gets to the actual into the statutes. So to do that, I'm just going to start with the 2017 regular session. The interim record is like records of anything that's been filed, reports and stuff since the session ended. Then, of course, you've got the 2018 pre-filed bills. But since the 2017 session is finished, we're going to go there to start with the bills in the House. And so every bill that was filed, there were 540 bills filed last year. And this doesn't give you a whole lot of information just looking at this screen. But if you know the bill number, you can pull up what bill you're looking at. So there's your 2, 3, 4 sponsors there. Tells you a little bit about what it's relating to, and then it was introduced in the House, it went to the State Government Committee, and then it died. Didn't go anywhere, nothing happened to it. If you want to see the actual language of the bill, you can click right there on the blue link, and this is the language of the bill that was filed, but again, it died, it didn't go anywhere. So we're going to look at a bill that we know went somewhere, House Bill 1. So there's all of the sponsors. This is the original introduction of the House bill. And then, again, there it is introduced. These here are every time something was introduced to amend that bill. So you have House Committee Substitute 1, House Floor Amendment 1, House Floor Amendment 2, House Floor Amendment 3, and on and on and on. There wasn't apparently a Senate substitute, so that's good. That actually makes it a little bit easier to do. So these dates down here come in handy because they're going to tell you what happened to the bill throughout its life. So it was introduced into the House, and it went to the Economic Development and Welfare Committee, but it was taken from there, had its first reading, and returned. Then it was reported favorably on the next day, and then it went to the Rules Committee substitute, posted for passage in the regular passage of the day. So between January 3rd and January 4th is when it actually had its committee hearing, because it had to go to a committee at some point, and for it to be reported favorably, that means that the Economic Development and Workforce Investment Committee actually heard this bill. And I'll show you where that comes in handy in just a minute. Had a few amendments, reported favorably again, had its third reading, it passed 25-12. Received in the Senate, enrolled, signed by the Senate, and it was delivered to the governor, and it was signed by the governor as Acts Chapter 1 on January the 9th. This is one of those ones that they fast-tracked with the new rules that they put in place last year. You can click here to look on the vote history so that you can see exactly who voted, but I'm telling you this is probably one that was exactly partisan down the line. So the issue, though, becomes, here's what the bill looked like as introduced, but there's all these amendments, and without knowing exactly what passed, what didn't, what failed, you don't know what the final bill looks like. But since the governor signed it, we can find what the final bill looks like by going to the Secretary of State's website. And on the Secretary of State's website, under the Secretary's desk or administration, you have the Executive Office, enacted legislation, And it's a really small link here on where there's the blue word that says database. It really needs to be more prominent, but so then now you can look through here. There's House Bill 1. Here's the PDF of the final version that was actually passed and signed by the governor. So you don't have to go through and figure out which amendment did and didn't pass. Or if you want to know which amendments did and didn't pass, you can pull this up and like have it sitting there and then look back at these amendments to see if it said change this word here to that word there. Because the amendments are usually very difficult to follow when you're looking at it, because as you could see on that amendment there, it didn't show what the entire amendment to the bill was. It only showed the small sentence that they wanted to amend in that particular portion of it. It tries to give you a little bit here, but like House Floor Amendment 4 had you have to figure out in Section 13 where this is exactly to determine whether it was added or not. That's why I like when it's actual past legislation to go to what the governor signed, because this is the final version of what the act is going to be that they're going to take the KRS from. Okay, so I also said we would return later to why these dates are important. So the committee hearings are recorded by the KET. And this is something I really don't like on the website here. Legislative activity, the online video coverage for the Kentucky General Assembly takes you to the page on KET where they do the legislative coverage. If you accidentally click where it says KET, it takes you to the main KET page, and from there it is extremely difficult to find the legislative coverage. So you have to remember to click on the right link. So here's the legislative coverage. There's no coverage today, or if there was, it's completed. But you can go to the archived legislative coverage. And the most recent stuff that they just did, but we want to change session because this is the 2017 regular session that we're looking for. And I don't know if any of you have ever watched the actual legislative sessions. The committee meetings aren't terribly bad, but the legislative session, they spend the first hour or so acknowledging people and meeting guests. And I mean, seriously, like the first hour is just nothing but them honoring people, introducing people, and it takes a while sometimes for them to get down to the actual business. But then there's some days when you watch it and they jump right in to the point where it's just like, oh, what happened? So it was the House Economic Development and Workforce Investment Committee on the 4th. And so this is where you would watch, and I'm not going to go into it because it's probably several hours long, but you could then watch the entire committee hearing on it for them to talk about the intent behind what they're doing and why they're changing things. If people come in and testify for it or testify against it, that's all here in the committee hearings. Now, the online stuff used to go back to about 2006 or so. I don't know if they've archived some of it in different locations now, but if you have something that's older than that someone is looking for, you have to actually call LRC. They have a library at LRC that they maintain all of these records, and so they can give you the minutes from the committee hearing, which is usually just like 2 or 3 sentences about what they're going to be actually talking about at that committee, and if they have DVDs, or sometimes they still have audio tapes of some of these hearings that you can get a hold of for the older things. That's usually a pretty in-depth research question that maybe a local attorney might come to you asking about if they don't know. I doubt the general public is going to come asking for that kind of thing. All right, so we're going to go back to the LRC's website. Couple of clicks back. I don't think it's going to let me. All right, I'll just type it in. Okay, and so again, those dates are also important because usually legislation does not pass that quickly. And so you're going to have sometimes it move from one committee to another committee. Both committees might have hearings on it. You may have a Senate committee hearing. You may have a House committee hearing. And all that information is there in those dates telling you when it was referred places. When it was reported favorably, usually that means that's the first time it's back in the chamber. So you want whatever the meeting right directly before that was in order to see what they said about it in the committee hearings. Okay, and so you can also pull up past sessions, past records. Again, it doesn't go back that terribly far, but LRC has that stuff if you want it over at the library. The calendar can be very interesting just because, you know, they're going to be in on January the 2nd, then they're doesn't look like they're planning on taking a whole lot of days off in between. Usually they would have taken about a week or two off and then come back in. So again, rules have changed a little bit since the turnover in the House. But you know, last day for bills, last days for things to be filed. Any of the days that don't have like the 23rd and 26th here, they're taking those 2 days off. And then there's the veto days, and then they've reserved the last 2 days. So the last day of session is going to be April 13th. So that at least tells you when they're going to be here and what they're going to be doing. And then the legislative calendar, if you click on it, if you want to know when they're having certain committee meetings or hearings. And once session gets started and they schedule things, there will be standing hearings and standing committee meetings. Like Judicial Committee may meet every Friday at 10 o'clock. So that'll be on the calendar, and if they are not going to meet, then they will put something up there to cancel it. Okay, so something that your patrons may actually want to know is who's my legislator, how do I find them, and they do have this lovely map here, and you can type in your city. Scroll in a little bit. That actually just makes things way worse, though. But once you scroll in a little bit, so it tells you who your legislators are. What have I done? I don't know what I've done, so I'm going to close it and try and come back. There we go. Looks normal now. And you can also look at their biographies. You know, picture of him, where his district is, just some information. So you can look up all of the information, mailing addresses, and all that stuff is here. So if any of your patrons come in and want to know who their legislator is because they're unhappy about something or they want to say how great they think they are, this is where they would come to find out who that is. And you can actually send an email to them. I don't know if this goes to staffers, if it goes directly to them, but somebody does usually check it, and they usually get back to you. Excuse me. Now, this is something more for probably the librarians. It's possible that you might have some patrons who want to access this kind of information, but they have a well, they did. Maybe they've used to be able to track bills, and I'm trying to find the bill tracking. I apologize. This is something I should have checked on earlier. I just never really thought they would get rid of it. I'm doing this instead. Because it used to be a service of ky.gov. is who it went through. My little search. It was there a second ago. It disappeared. All right, well, I'll search here. No results found. Well, I guess they have gotten rid of that, which is a shame. Because you could get emails about any time they were actually going to have hearings and meetings about specific bills or specific topics. But anyways, so moving on. Okay, so let's say someone comes in and they're like, I know they had a bill about roosters or something like that, and they don't know exactly what bill it is, because that's mostly likely what it's going to be. You go into the session, and then down here you have got an index by subject heading. And so you can actually look here, oh, this might be it. Wow, there's just a lot of things about livestock and poultry. And maybe they were talking about that horrible statute or bill that was introduced about sexually assaulting animals. That one actually made the news, so it's very possible that that's the one they heard about and they are coming in to try and see. So that you can click on it there and tell them it didn't get past being introduced into the Judiciary Committee. And by going to here, you can tell the Judiciary didn't even hear it. They never had any committee hearing on it or anything like that. It just died. It was never reported on and probably never even called up in Judiciary. So again, this is a nice thing here when they don't know exactly what it is, but they think they know something about it. And so the subject headings are pretty decent, and they can kind of go through here and see if they can find it. And that's available for all of the previous sessions as well. So something else on the LRC website that you might need to look at is the Kentucky Acts. So the Acts is once it's actually been passed, signed, and enacted, this is the bound copies that they send out. This is what they look like in electronic format. And I'm pretty sure they still say that they're not technically official, but I mean, it's exactly the same thing that they send out in the bound format. So a couple of different tables here. You've got the Acts chapters, which I'm not going to open because it's huge, and so we don't need to go through all of that. The KRS sections affected table was actually pretty helpful because it's going to tell you every single KRS that actually was affected, what bill it was, what Acts chapter it landed in, and what section of that bill that it landed in. So this is something I use quite a bit when I'm looking at all of the laws and whether or not something's been changed that the judges need to know about. I can pull this up and just go through each of these statutes and say, okay, yep, this 18A is one that we would need, and so I can then go pull up that particular section. So you again might have somebody who wants to know, well, did they change the law on this? Because I know what it used to say. And you can pull up the Acts affected the KRS sections affected table in the Acts and look up that particular KRS and say, yes, it was affected, here's the bill, or no, it wasn't because it's not listed on here. Sometimes people know the bill number, but they don't know what act that it became. So you can look up House Bill became Chapter 1, but like House Bill 13 became Acts Chapter 194. So they definitely do not stay numerical. So you do have to have this table sometimes if you know the House Bill and you want to know what act it became in the actual enactment. Same sort of thing, but reversed if you want to know, well, I've seen Acts chapter 16, what House Bill was that? That was House Bill 207. Then you can go back using 207, find House Bill 207 in the regular session, go to the House House Bill 207. And then you can look and see it was introduced to Banking and Finance, so you can pull Banking and Finance's committee reports and watch those. And it was signed March 16th by the governor. And if you actually want to see what the governor signed, then you can go back and look at that. It doesn't look like it had too many amendments, so it's probably pretty similar to what's actually in the House Bill 207. So that's sort of how you can dissect a statute all the way from its bill to final enactment. The Kentucky Administrative Regulations are something else that you sometimes need to look at as you know, what's the law on this? And a lot of times they get overlooked. They're for the regulatory agencies, so something like the Cabinet for Families and Children would have a lot of regs. Of course, the libraries have a whole set of regs, and so you guys know that you have to follow those. The thing about the regs is they don't have the previous regs on here, and if you want previous versions of a particular regulation, you have to actually call the administrative reg room at the Capitol as part of LRC, and they have folders that have all of the versions of any particular reg going all the way back and every time it's been changed. I don't know of anywhere else that you can get that information other than at that office, unless somebody has every single volume of the regs going all the way back. And I don't know, KDLA might have those, but I know we don't, because it's just a lot of shelf space for that kind of item that's not used all that often. And again, you can search it by keyword. But see, when you come here, it took me straight to LRC, so you want to switch it to administrative regs, because that was going to search everything. And there's 803 KR 1005. It doesn't have a whole lot to do with actual libraries. It just has the word library in it. So again, it's doing a full word search, and so sometimes you're going to find things that you don't actually really need or want because it's so broad. The Constitution's on here. The one thing I don't like about the way the Constitution is on here, it kind of stops and makes it looks like, but then you have to actually click to get the full list, because we go well past 263. I know 263 is the last section, but it's just the way it's kind of broken down. It's very minimal here. If you want the complete list, you have to click on it there. And I think that's about it for the LRC's website, unless anybody has questions before I move on. Nope. All right. So I know the next thing I talk about is the GPO, and I'm just going to kind of look at it real quick, because GPO's got so much stuff on here. It would be a 2 or 3 hour webinar just on itself, and they actually have webinars on here that you can watch that'll give you a better idea how to train on this website, because I don't feel that I'm qualified to train on this one, but I do use the FedSys site sometimes, especially for the congressional record and things in digital format. So just going to kind of leave that one out there as a show you. Now, something else I want to show you is the site that I went to is ky.gov. And the little search thing is right up here in the corner, but it keeps disappearing. I'm sure that's just a matter of the webinar thing. But you can also search from here. And this only searches the ky.gov sites. So when you're looking for any Kentucky agency, any Kentucky group that's going to be for your patrons, this is actually a really great place to start. So, I'm trying to think. So, Kentucky Board of Nursing, that's probably what somebody means if they say, I need the Nursing Association, or I want to file a complaint. That, again, would go to the Kentucky Board of Nursing. So, if they have something within the state of Kentucky that's a government agency, you can just set them down at ky.gov and have them search, and that, I think, will help them find just about anything that they really need. Board of Medical Licensure. All right. That's probably something that would be common, and then it still takes you to the Kentucky Cabinet for Health and Family Services, which, they changed that name so many times. And then the next one right there is the complaint form. So this is a really, really good general website for any sort of Kentucky-specific complaint, agency, or need for your patrons. All right. The Secretary of State's website is also a very good website. It's going to have a lot more to do with, again, under administration, you've got the executive office. So the full executive journal has like any pardons, any appointments that were made, as well as enacted legislation. So sometimes you may get things like that. Open Boards Kentucky is really kind of a cool place that I've actually just discovered myself. So like any of the boards or commissions that the governor appoints somebody to, all of that information is here under Open Boards Kentucky. So if they want to know who's on the medical licensure board because they're complaining about them, or who's on the retirement board or whatever, they can search all that through here, and it's actually a very good site. The civics site is good because it gives a little bit of information for people. Business is a lot of what you're going to also find because, the business filings and the business records. If someone comes into the library and they have some sort of complaint about, well, they cheated me on this and I don't even know if they're a real business, they can look up the business records and actually find out if they're in good standing with the Secretary of State, if they actually have filed as an LLC or a corporation or anything along those lines. And then, of course, they do have the election, so any information about becoming a candidate or getting registered to vote is also all available here on the Secretary of State's website. And the election results. If there's an election that they want to know who won, they can actually go in here and find different election results. And these, I think, are great myself. I've used them for quite a few different things. Again, it may be not as much for your patrons' purposes, but maybe you guys would use it. But either way, you know where it is. The Attorney General's website is another really good site. See, right there, I think that's a great service just to start with. If you take them there, they get scanned, alerts for scams. So the civil branch is usually where a lot of this information is. The family branch is another one because it's Office of Consumer Protection has a lot of great information for seniors, for somebody who's bought a car that's, blowing up on them, like the lemon laws and things like that. It's also where you can find living wills. This packet here is a complete packet for a living will in Kentucky. It is follows all of the legal requirements and is completely valid. So if somebody's going into the hospital for a surgery and they're worried about it and they need a living will or anything like that, it's right here on the Attorney General's website. They don't need to talk to an attorney, and it's completely valid in the state of Kentucky. And the criminal branch is really probably not something that they're going to need, but if, say, there's a complaint against a prosecutor in any of the other counties, which we see sometimes at the law library. I don't know if anybody else does, but, the county attorney won't do this or the prosecutor won't do that. This is actually the criminal branch at the Attorney General's office is probably about the only place you could really make a complaint about that because they're elected officials, but if there's a complaint that's strong enough, they could do an investigation. And honestly, there's a lot of similar complaints about, the sheriff's office in such and such county won't do this or won't do that. There's not a lot that can be done because they are elected officials, but the Attorney General's office would be one of the few places that could actually investigate them if there's a true criminal enterprise taking place in a small county's sheriff office. So if those kinds of complaints come in, which again, we occasionally get at the law library, the Attorney General's office is the best place to direct them. All right, so now I'm going to go back to trying to yay. Okay. Okay, and so I talked about all those already. USA.gov is a similar site to ky.gov, and it's going to search just the .gov websites. It's not completely comprehensive because some U.S. government websites did it again. All right, now where did it go? Some U.S. government websites are actually .nets or .orgs, or some of those sites could be very helpful. There used to be other ways to search, which included the .nets and the .orgs that were associated with government offices. Those have not been. Google used to have something called Google Uncle Sam that would search all of them, and it was great. And they took it away, and no one knows why they took it away, and they won't bring it back. So USA.gov is the best you're going to get. But it is pretty good because it's going to search all of the .gov sites that on the federal side. And so you're going to get a lot of the same sort of information that you would searching the ky.gov from the Kentucky side. So again, it's just another good resource if somebody comes in and it's a federal government thing that they're either complaining about or looking for. You can set them down at USA.gov and let them do their search without it being something where you feel like you're giving legal advice because you're telling them what to look for, but it gives them better resources instead of doing a Google search and coming up with, joebobswebpage.com. We've all been there. And yeah, some of these are older screenshots. Okay, so moving on now, unless anybody has any questions about agencies or anything like that. Okay. Journal articles. This is maybe something that you're not going to get a whole lot of questions for, but it may be something that could help when somebody comes in and they've got a legal question that's really complicated, but they really don't want to talk to an attorney because they don't trust attorneys, or they've already had 5 or 6 attorneys that keep firing them, or they have to keep firing their attorneys. So sometimes they might need more information, whether they can understand it or not. They might need to read something a little bit more lengthy. So Google Scholar is something I showed you all last time. And I think we talked about the journals last time as well then. But instead of looking at the case law, you can find articles on Google Scholar. Thing is, you can find articles on a lot of different things. It's not just legal articles. You've got patent articles. It has the citations. I have actually used this to find a journal article that was scientific enough to be cited in a judicial opinion about how methamphetamine was actually made, because they needed like the chemical makeup of it. So, I mean, I've actually used this for the justices in citing opinions before. because we, as a small library, do not have a huge journal database that we use. And I know a lot of those are very expensive, and if you want to put your patrons on there, and if they start downloading things, that you guys can get charged by the page. This is a place where they can go and search any kind of scientific article or medical article, legal article, whatever, and it gives them something to read. Whether or not they're going to really take a whole lot out of it, I can't say, but it gives you something to give them for them to read, and they could actually find some really great information off of it. The American Bar Association also has a website that has free journal articles on it, and I'm not even going to try and take you there because it's extremely difficult to find on the ABA's website, but here is the full address for it. If you want to go take a look at it, you have to kind of copy and paste that to really get there because they hide it very well on that site. The directory of open access journals, again, this is not just legal journals, it's any open access journal online in lots of different topic areas. Law Review Commons is another one that is just open access law review journals. Screenshots. Okay, so here's some general indexes and search engines for legal information. The Kentucky Bar Association's not great. They have a few things on there. Mostly the Bar Association website is helpful if someone is looking for an attorney, either in a certain area or if they actually know the name of an attorney, they're trying to get information about them. They're all listed on the KBA's website. And you can also take them there if they want to file a complaint against their attorney. It's not probably something that the attorneys are happy that I'm showing everybody, but if someone comes in and says, my attorney didn't do a good job and he was terrible and I want to complain about him, I'm just going to show them where the complaint is and leave it up to the KBA to go through the process that they need to determine whether the complaint is valid or not, because it's not really my place to tell somebody, well, I don't think you've got a valid complaint against your attorney. I'm just going to show them where it is. The Law Library of Congress. Every time okay. Share my screen. And then it's down here somewhere. There it is. Okay. So the Law Library of Congress actually has guides to Law Online, legal research guides, guides to their collection, and then they also have all of the U.S. states and territories. So if they're looking for someplace besides Kentucky, and you have absolutely no idea where to send them, Library of Congress has information on all of the different states and their offices. There's their judiciary, there's their legislature, legal guides, and so it's a really good place if you're looking for someplace outside of the stuff that I've shown you for Kentucky that you can send somebody where they can kind of page through and figure out what it is they're actually looking for. U of L also has something very similar, and I do apologize about this. I don't have all of these addresses memorized like I do the Kentucky ones because I don't go to them quite as often. Again, like I said, the University of Louisville is pretty much the same. There is also the one at Cornell, the ILL, and it has all 50 states, and it takes you to the official states legislative webpage or official states judicial webpage, very much like the Library of Congress does. The Criminal Law Library of New York, I kind of liked theirs. Because it's really kind of different. Because it starts with as broad a search engine as you can get to, and then starts really going down into specific sites. And then like the lexisweb.com is actually free legal search engine powered by Lexis, allows you to get to some of the stuff that Lexis has on their online stuff, but not everything. But it's something that Westlaw doesn't have at all. And the first place I saw it was here on the New York's Criminal Law Library of New York's website. So I still point people to it because they try to keep a pretty good metadata site here of the different places you can go for legal research and research in general. The National Center for State Courts and the National Center for State Legislatures both have quite a few of their own publications. They work with like SJI, which is the State Judiciary Institute, and some other different societies, so they will have different publications on their websites that have statistics. Again, this is something you might have a patron come in asking for, or something you might be curious about, is do they have statistics like nationwide of how many courts have family courts, or how many courts actually have probation and pretrial programs versus bounty hunters. What I can't remember exactly what I'm trying to think of. Cash probation, or not probation. Wow, I'm just having a complete mind meltdown. Sorry. We have the pretrial system, but other states actually still have bounty hunters where somebody pays their bond, and then if they don't show up to court, they get hunted down and brought back in. So you can find some statistics and reports and things like that there. The National Center for State Courts also has an entire section on access to justice. If anybody else is interested in, access to justice, because it's a movement that's not just for lawyers and law librarians, but it's actually, public librarians that really need to work on that as well. And so they've been trying to do stuff with that as well. Okay, I've shown you legal aid. Most of you know the Department for Libraries and Archives. That is where you send somebody if they have a question about an old case file. Pretty much the circuit clerk's offices will only keep those files about 10 to 15 years back, depending on how much room they have in their courthouse. Anything older than that is at the Department for Libraries and Archives. And the first thing they would do would go to the clerk's office, ask about the file to find out what the accessioning number is, and sometimes it even has a shelf location, and then contact the Department for Libraries and Archives with the exact information of what they want. It is still possible for them to contact KDLA's Record Center and request those without going to the clerk's office first. It's just faster if they go to the clerk's office. The Legal Directory Online is actually got multiple states. It's not just Kentucky. And it's a searchable database of lawyers. It's very similar to the one on the KBA's website. It may have a little bit more information about locations and things like that, but it's pretty much the same sort of thing. Here's the legal directories. The only thing about the legal directories site that I really don't like is if you misspell a name, it's just not going to find it. It does not do any sort of phonetic searching at all. It searches just for what you type in. Access to justice is probably not something. We only got 10 minutes left. I'm not going to cover everything. But access to justice is the movement that's been going on for the last 10 years or more about making sure that everyone has access to the courts. There are laws that require criminal defendants to have an attorney, but there is nothing on the civil side that requires anyone to have an attorney. But it's very difficult for a lot of people to navigate the system without an attorney, even if they can't afford one. Legal aid has restrictions because they can only represent someone who meets certain poverty guidelines. They also cannot represent two parties in the same dispute. So like if it's a husband and wife and they have a divorce that they really do need an attorney for, legal aid can only represent one of them because it's a conflict to represent the other, which means that person is left without a lawyer. Because legal aid legally can't help represent them if they're representing the spouse. And so this is where, webinars like this are very helpful to get librarians to be able to guide people to resources, where we're trying to get more things on the Court of Justice website that are actually fill-in-the-blank forms. The chat feature that I showed you during the part 1, where people can actually go in and talk to a librarian. The new Pro Bono Online, where they can actually type in a question that will go to an actual attorney who is authorized to give legal advice over the internet through just a simple chat. The online reference interview that is available on the kyjustice.org was designed with libraries in mind to try and help them guide people to the right resources. The Access to Justice Commission is kind of up and down right now, and here's a couple of places where you can look at more information if you're interested. Because again, librarians are a resource that we are trying not to overlook as part of Access to Justice, because being in the counties on the daily front, people are more likely to come into a library than they are to a courthouse because they may be afraid to go to a courthouse, or the libraries where the internet access is. So we know that the libraries are on the front line, and the more that we can bring them into helping with access to justice, the more people we can actually reach. And again, you can look at the study there. A lot of this was a program that we did in several different locations throughout the state several years ago that Terry actually sat on the panel and helped us with. Again, I don't want to go through the whole thing, but you guys are welcome to read over the slides. Some of Terry's advices and his disclaimers are definitely on here, so I'm sure a lot of you have seen them before. And again, I have talked about, at the beginning of the seminar or webinar about giving legal advice and what you should and shouldn't do. The attorney that we had that came from the KDA said he has never seen a librarian for unauthorized practice of law come across his desk. But he also said, you don't want to be the first. Here's the reality. It's just not a very good thing. Or very seldom would it ever be prosecuted. I think that's really it for me, because these slides, I think are better if everybody just kind of wants to go over them unless they have any questions. And we've got down to 7 minutes, so.
We do have one about who do the librarians out in the field need to contact about their local law libraries. They have one at the courthouse, but as far as people having access to it.
The local county law libraries, the circuit court clerk is the ex officio librarian. So they should have a key and should have access. The county attorney is also statutorily one of the trustees of the library. If you run into a county law library where they tell you that it's not open to the public and will not give you the key or let anyone from the public in, I would be the person you actually contact, because I'm the one who's got the slightest, tiniest little bit of oversight of them, because they really were not designed for a central court of justice that passed in '76, and they didn't bother to update the statutes on them from 1911. So
there technically is one in every county?
Technically, there is one in every county, but I know we've got at least between 5 to 10 that are not operating at all.
Okay, don't see any more questions right now. I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Please go ahead and feel free to chat anything in. Here's something, you want to say anything about forms?
Sorry, I don't read the chat when you guys are doing it, but yes, it is like Stephanie and the Janet Ivanovich series. The Bounty Hunters, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, they lost me a couple back, but I read most of them.
See, I always pictured Dog the Bounty Hunter, which was that terrible series on like A&E.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm gonna go through your forms here. Let's see. Pam just sent in a question a second ago. If you want to address that while I'm getting to the end here.
Yes, you can actually tell people that there's a law library at the courthouse, but it may not have internet access, may not even be a computer there. Some of them are strictly books, and they're probably going to get more research done in your library than the county law libraries. But some of the county law libraries actually have Westlaw patron access where they can do a real Westlaw search. It's just so hit and miss across the state that it's hard to really know whether recommending that's going to be helpful to your patrons or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we want to thank the Institute of Museum and Library Services for helping us to present today's webinar, and wanted to remind you all of some webinars that are upcoming over the next couple weeks. There's still plenty of time to register for these, including the Girls Who Code Club's webinar tomorrow. And I'm going to just switch the screen over here. If you would like to download the slides as a reference, get all those links and all the good stuff that we didn't have time to cover at the end about the reference interview, you can download the PDF there in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Just click the PDF and then click the button below it that says download file. And for our live attendees, I'll be sending out a certificate of attendance as well as a link to a survey in an email following today's webinar. And additionally, this webinar was recorded and it will be posted on our archived webinars page along with part 1, which is already up. So part 2 will be posted there next to it. You can definitely come back and review anything that was covered or send any of your coworkers on to view that archived webinar. So I'm not seeing any final questions for Jennifer. We want to thank her very much. Yes, we're getting lots of thanks. Excellent webinar. So we appreciate her taking 2 Thursdays out of her busy schedule to share her knowledge with us. So thank you very much, Jennifer.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yes, and we have her contact information, any follow-up questions there. And of course, you can always feel free to contact us here at KDLA. Anything we can do to help. Our reference librarians in the state library, always happy to help as well. And we can always try and get you to the person that you need to be speaking to if we can't help you. So, okay, I'm going to go ahead and mute the microphone, and we'll stick around just for a minute or so to see if any final questions come in. But otherwise, this is it. So thank you guys. Have a great afternoon.